You're watching Better Business Bureau's Business at its Best, brought to you by Ataraxis. You've got employees, we've got solutions. Human resources, insurance, benefits, and payroll. Our business is your business. BBB's Business at its Best.
And welcome to Better Business Bureau's Business at its Best. Each week, we spend this time showing you how companies in Idaho are acting with ethics and integrity, doing the right thing to grow the economy, and they're making a big difference along the way. You know, Better Business Bureau has 6 standards for trust. It's how we expect ethical businesses to act in the marketplace. It's about advertising honestly, telling the truth, being transparent, being responsive, safeguarding privacy, and honoring promises. Those are the standards for trust. Our focus today is how companies in Idaho honor promises. If you are a customer, it's what to watch for. If you own or manage a business, it's how to behave. We cover the Snake River region talking about honoring promises in the banking, insurance, and hospitality industries on this program today. Business at its Best is possible because of our media partners. In the West and South, you're watching KTVB, Idaho's very own 24/7. In Eastern Idaho, you're watching Local News 8's Now channel. You know, there is a funny thing about human nature. We see a news headline about someone in a specific industry behaving badly. All of a sudden, we start stereotyping everyone in that industry. It doesn't make sense, since news is just that. It's what's happening out of the ordinary. Well, the banking industry has taken its share of knocks in the past several years in the headlines, and that's why we start with Joel Hickman, president of KeyBank of Idaho. Joel, thanks so much for being with us today. And we're talking about this idea of honoring promises because from a Better Business Bureau perspective, we work closely with a lot of banks, and we hear about banks doing the right thing day in and day out. So the stereotype, not deserved. We set the stage that way.
I appreciate that. We haven't exactly got the best media attention here the last few years.
But it's important for folks to understand that's why it's news. It's something new and not something happening all the time, out of the ordinary. So let's start with this idea on honoring promises. And you brought with you the 5 core principles of the fiduciary standard. Tell us about that. You said it sits on your desk.
It does. You know, it originates out of the investment world is the fiduciary standard, and that obviously when you're managing money for someone, that's you know, whether you're dealing with a business or an individual, the assets of that company or that individual are very precious.
Stakes are high.
Stakes are high, and so that fiduciary standard is the highest level of competency and in our case, standard that we need to act on behalf of our clients. And so there are 5 core principles, Dale, and they're putting the client's interests first. It's act with prudence, do not mislead your client, avoid conflicts of interest, and most importantly, it's full disclosure and fairly manage in that client's favor.
And those are the promises that you're going to honor day in and day out for folks. When you have something like that are your guiding principles, what does that do for the relationship building aspect of your business, which for everybody in business, the relationship building is so important?
Relationship, that's, you know, it's as a banker, I'm not a lender, yeah. I'm a banker, and that's what separates me from others, and what we like to do at Key is that we think of ourselves as bankers. A lender is someone that just loans money. A banker is someone that looks after that entire relationship. Relationship is paramount.
How does this idea of honoring promises factor into the going above and beyond, so that you're exceeding expectations, so to speak?
You know, I think it first starts with listening and getting out in front of your client. You don't, you know, I love the ads on TV now for 24-hour access, and a lot of, you know, our bank is open for 24 hours. Well, technically we are with internet products and so forth, but what we like to pride ourselves in is you can come into our offices and talk to us face to face. We're going to listen to you. We're going to have people there decked to take care of whatever issues you may have, and it's the first line of that fiduciary standard, and that is you can't act in the best interest if you're not in front of your client, listening to what their concerns are, what their issues are, and addressing those.
Excellent ideas for every business, regardless of the industry, to follow. Joel Hickman, President of KeyBank of Idaho, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Dale. Appreciate it.
We're talking about the importance of honoring promises right now on Business at its Best. If you're a customer, we're showing you what to watch for. If you're the owner or the manager, it's ways that you can honor your customers by honoring promises. Coming up later, we go inside the hospitality industry for a look at how one hotel in Idaho keeps honoring promises front and center right there in front of the employees. And coming up next, creating a culture of honoring promises by practicing what you preach with employees. You're watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. Ataraxis makes business at its best possible each week. The company takes care of the day-to-day work of HR, benefits, and payroll so a business owner can focus on growing business. Cilley with Ataraxis joins us right now, and thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're talking about the concept. We're focusing today on honoring promises, and as you work with business owners and managers on these HR issues, how do you coach them through specifically honoring promises when it comes to employees?
You know, the first thing I think we've talked about before, documentation. You got to document it. If you tell an employee something and make them a promise, make sure you write it down and document it so that they understand what it is and that you understand what it is. Because if you don't, chances are they're going to remember it differently than you do. And then that's how disappointment and frustration begins, and morale starts going down from there.
And when you talk about documenting, is that an email that you type up, send out?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be official, just something that puts it all down on paper somewhere where you both have it and both can remember it. It can go in their file, it could do anything else like that. You know, the next thing too, once you do that documentation, is follow through. Too many times, you know, a lot of times we make promises to people because we are pacifying them or just trying to get something done and make them feel better. But if you're going to make a promise to somebody, make sure that you do that, because if you don't do that, they're not going to believe you after a while when you tell them something.
And it doesn't take many of those cases to really break a lot of trust.
Not at all. And consistency is the last one. Make sure your management team is all on the same page with what you tell people, because if they start breaking down and hearing different stories, employer-employee relationship is a lot like parent-child relationship. If they think there's a weakness, they're going to exploit it, and then they don't believe anybody.
Okay, so the communication aspect across the management spectrum and along with the employee is
Right.
so crucial. So on the face of it, we all know the importance of modeling good behavior. Honoring promises would be the behavior you want to model. But let's talk about this idea of when we model that behavior of honoring promises with the employee, how that carries through to the employee-customer relationship.
It goes back to what we just talked about. Yeah. If we do all those things and you're treating your employees with respect, and you're making an environment where they feel good about it and they understand that they're respected and their promises are kept that are made to them, they're going to feel good about the company, the leadership, and the company's mission. And when they feel good about that, when they're dealing with customers, they're going to want to make sure that the customer has the same feeling about the company that they have about the company. And if that's how they feel, then they're going to make sure it goes down to the customer. And if the customer's not happy, they're going to do things to make them feel the same way about the company that they do.
Now, I can imagine that the folks watching the show, they've either been in that employee position where there's been a broken promise, or that could be a manager or a business owner saying, wow, I've got some broken promises in the past. How do you go about mending the fences in those situations where there's been a broken promise, especially from a manager's perspective?
Start over.
Okay.
Just say, you know what, I made a mistake.
Own up to it first.
Own up to it. Figure out what the problem was, where it went wrong, and then formulate a plan to go forward to make sure that you're putting it in place so that everybody understands it. And then get everybody together, apologize again, and say, we made a mistake, this is what we're going to do to make it better, and this is how we're going to do it going forward. Implement the plan, make sure everybody understands what it is, and then give them updates. You probably have to communicate more with them at that point in time on the updates of the plan and what you're doing to make sure that it follows through. But you also have to understand it takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of time.
All right. Cilley, Ataraxis, the website?
AtaraxisPEO.com.
All right, thank you so much for being with us. And coming
Thanks.
up later, have you considered giving your employees a reminder about the importance of honoring promises that your company makes? One business in Idaho did just that. See the great results later on Business at its Best. First, if there's one place you want to be sure promises are kept, it's your insurance policy. You are watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. And welcome back to Business at its Best. We're on TV in great Idaho towns like Lava, Malad, Rupert, Bliss, Eagle, Payette, and Vale, Oregon. We're talking about ways businesses should honor promises today. David Waldo with the Waldo Agencies joins us. David is a board member for Better Business Bureau, and it's so good to have you with us today.
Thank you.
You're also a board member for Mutual of Enumclaw.
Correct. Mutual of Enumclaw Insurance, a regional carrier.
Regional carrier. Let's talk about what this means as far as honoring promises, specifically in the insurance industry.
Sure. As you know, Dale, I'm also an insurance agent,
Yep.
so I actually wear multiple hats.
Absolutely.
But the promise keeping goes long and wide and deep in the insurance industry. It must. At Enumclaw, they have a motto that they repeat over and over and over. It's promises kept.
2 words.
Promises kept.
And you said you have a story that
Yes, I
illustrates
do.
that.
Yeah, we were standing in the snow a winter ago while a house was burning, and we had made a call at 10 o'clock at night just to the help desk at Enumclaw, letting them know that one of their clients' homes were on fire. And while we're standing in the snow watching the fire burn, the adjuster came.
That quick.
And before he left that evening, the family had enough money to move into a motel for the duration of cleaning up the mess and rebuilding their home.
That would be the promises kept.
It was a promise that was kept. That is actually going over and above keeping a promise, but when you focus on keeping promises, then you do go over and above.
And we've talked about that in just some prior segments to this, giving the customer more than is expected. But talking about the customer, you also have made the point that promises go both ways, especially
Right.
in this insurance relationship.
That is correct. And as agents, we understand that the insurance contract is a bilateral promise.
Okay.
Both parties are making promises. Promises to pay a premium for the client, but more than that, a promise to be open and honest with the insurance carrier. Promise to do things that will minimize and limit the risk that the insurance carrier is agreeing and promising to pay for. So it does go both ways, and there is some responsibility for both parties.
And it's important for the client to realize that responsibility.
That is correct. Yes, we see it's an education piece that we have the privilege as intermediaries, as agents for the insurance company, to work education into the process so that people understand their part of the promise.
And that really carries through for any business owner in any industry, that there needs to be that level of education to help their client, their customer, understand where the responsibilities lie.
Correct. We also have a retail real estate sales business, and we teach our salespeople that it's an education process for them and their clients. Teach their clients.
And it's also a great opportunity for relationship building with the client.
Correct.
David Waldo, it's the Waldo Agencies in Eastern Oregon, Western Idaho. Thank you so much for being with us today. Great information for our businesses to keep in mind as we think about honoring promises. Better Business Bureau has a number of resources to help your company be the best it can be. Check out our website at bbb.org and go to Facebook. You can search for BBB Snake River Region and click the like button. We'd appreciate that. Coming up a little later on Business at its Best, we take a look at honoring promises in the hospitality industry. What happens when you check in? You're watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. You are watching Business at its Best on Idaho's very own 24/7 and local news 8's Now channel in Eastern Idaho. Our focus today, honoring promises. Dr. Bill Russell is Chief Legal Counsel for Northwest Nazarene University. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Have a good evening.
And we're talking about this concept when we bring an attorney on the set to talk about honoring promises. I can imagine that a lot of people just go straight to the contract. But that's the core of a promise made.
The word promise and the word contract are not synonyms, but they're awfully close. So from a legal perspective, when you talk about promise, you're talking about a contract. and contracts have legal consequences. So there's an ethical side to promises, but there's also a very serious legal side to promises. And it's important as a business person, either as a buyer or a seller, as an employer or an employee, to understand that promises become contracts and courts will enforce them if certain things happen.
Written or verbal?
Doesn't matter. One of my favorite stories is about two guys. A client came to me many years ago and said that he'd agreed to sell tires to somebody, and the guy wouldn't buy them now. And I said, well, we'll go after that. It turned out that they had made the agreement while co-inmates at McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary. They got out, and he wanted to sell the tires, and the other guy didn't want to buy them. Guess what? It was a contract. So
even made
in prison. It's a contract.
Really? Okay. So the person ended up buying the tires.
He ended up having to buy the tires.
That is fascinating. Which really goes to prove this idea that if you say it, you need to follow through.
And you know, one of the things that happens is that people aren't clear about what they're saying, so you get careless about promises. The best thing you can do as either a buyer or a seller, an employer or an employee, is be clear. And when you start to make a promise, explore it, spend the time to talk about it. If it's in writing, great. If it's not, talk it through. Problems happen when the promise is misperceived from one side or the other. So clarity really matters.
And writing it down really offers a lot of clarity.
It really makes sense. And I know a lot of people say, well, I just need my handshake, that's good. The problem is you're assuming that both sides understood exactly what it was you were shaking hands on.
What are some of the problems that you see out there with making promises that end up being contractual?
Sure. Usually it is a matter of trying to do it quickly and not thoughtfully. So understand that when you make a promise, you're doing something legal. Take the time to be precise, take the time to talk it through, take the time to think it through. We tend in this world to want to do things quickly. We're a fast society now. We want to do deals fast. Sometimes a little time to make sure you're being clear, to make sure you're being understood, and to make sure you're being thorough is the way you stay out of trouble. Promises from one side don't always appear to be the same promise from the other side, and you need to get past that.
Because you can have two people walk away from the same conversation, and it's the old game of sitting around in a circle, and you start by whispering in somebody's ear, and by the time it gets back to you, it's a completely different story.
And you know what we call that? We call that lots of money for lawyers.
Lots of money for lawyers. That's a good one. So writing things down, keeping track of it, it goes both ways, whether you're talking about employees, whether you're talking about customers, business partnerships.
Virtually everything that happens in business is a contract.
Yeah.
It's hard to find anything in business that happens that isn't a contract. That means it's always about promises. Sometimes they get fulfilled instantaneously. When you go to Albertsons or Winco, the promise happens right away because the product is passed immediately. But it's all contracts, it's all promises. You're never not promising in business.
Dr. Bill Russell, NNU, thank you so much for being with us today. And coming up next on Business at its Best, honoring promises from check-in to check-out and beyond. You're watching Business at its Best, presented by Ataraxis. Welcome back to Business at its Best. We had an interesting conversation with Jeff Johnson, the manager of the Fairfield by Marriott in Idaho Falls. Honoring promises, it is a big deal for he and his team. Here's a look at what it means.
Honoring promises would be Marriott's philosophy in taking care of their guests. Their philosophy is if you take care of your guests or you take care of your employees will take care of your guests. And so the philosophy is if you live sort of by the basics of the basics of the day, then it all falls into place. What you do, you get the basic of the day card, which is has the 21 basics, and on the 21st day they repeat themselves. So you get to know the basics, you learn them, and every day they're posted out by the time clock as well. So you read the basics. We have a basic huddle every morning that lasts about 15 minutes. It's always positive. It talks about the basic of the day. Today is number 4. I think is basic. It's a basic thing that really everybody has the ability to do. They just may need that extra encouragement to learn how to do it. It's called confident service. So if we teach them confident service, then that just bounds each day, keeping it the fundamentals there. So that's why we do basic every single day, is that it does reaffirm each day, and then by the repeating themselves, it reaffirms that as well. In fact, I test them sometimes. I'll walk up to one of our employees and say, "Where's your basic of the day card?" And if they can pull it out, I'll give them a candy bar or, a couple bucks to go to lunch that day or something. Things like personalized housekeeping. When our guests know our regular customers, they know what they like. They may like two regular coffees and no decaffeinated, or they like an extra pillow in their room, or they like an extra blanket. Our people know that. They know that the requests, we keep track of that. Things like, in fact, it's funny, in the mornings I say, "Show me your basic of the day card," and I have several ladies that have been with me probably 9 to 10 years. We've been open 10 years, and it's all crumpled, and you can't hardly read the writing on it because it's so worn out. And that's the people that care. Those are the people that know the concepts and understand what the basic's all about. The kind of things that we want to embrace to our staff so that they bring that forward to our guests. Absolutely.
And you can find trustworthy companies like Fairfield by Marriott at bbb.org. In fact, before you buy, be sure to check out that business with us, check out its rating, and then after the purchase, be sure to leave a customer review on the company's business review. Let's do a quick recap on what we learned today when it comes to honoring promises from a business perspective. First and foremost, be sure you're modeling the good behavior, whether it is with customers, whether it's with your employees. When you are known for honoring promises in your company, you are building trust. Then put it in writing. When you have a promise in writing, it makes it a lot easier for everyone involved to know exactly what is promised and what the level of expectation is. It brings clarity to the promise. And finally, as Dr. Russell said, all business relationships are really based on this idea of promises. Go out, honor promises, have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week for the next edition of Business at its Best.